Puncak Jaya Carstensz Pyramid is the highest summit of Mount Carstensz, ʻkɑːrstəns, in the Sudirman Range of the western central highlands of Papua Province, Indonesia. Other summits are East Carstensz Peak, Sumantri and Ngga Pulu. Other names include Nemangkawi in the Amungkal language, Carstensz Toppen and Gunung Soekarno.At 4,884 meters above sea level. Puncak Jaya is the highest mountain in Indonesia, the highest on the island of New Guinea, the highest on the continent of Australia, the highest in Oceania, and the fifth highest mountain in political Southeast Asia. It is also the highest point between the Himalayas and the Andes, and the highest island peak in the world. Some sources claim Papua New Guinea's Mount Wilhelm, 4,509 meters, as the highest mountain peak in Oceania, on account of Indonesia being part of Asia. The massive open Grasberg mine is within 4 kilometers from Puncak Jaya. History. Discovery. The highlands surrounding the peak were inhabited before European contact, and the peak was known as Nemangkawi in Amungkal. Puncak Jaya was named Carstensz Pyramid after Dutch explorer Jan Carstensz, who first sighted the glaciers on the peak of the mountain on a rare, clear day in 1623. The sighting went unverified for over 2 centuries, and Carstensz was ridiculed in Europe when he said he had seen snow near the equator. The snowfield of Puncak Jaya was reached as early as 1909 by a Dutch explorer, Hendrik Albert Lawrence, with 6 of his Dayak Kenya porters recruited from the Apokai in Borneo. The predecessor of the Lawrence National Park, which encompasses the Carstensz Range, was established in 1919 following the report of this expedition. Climbing history. In 1936 the Dutch Carstensz expedition, unable to establish definitely which of the 3 summits was the highest, attempted to climb each. Anton Colijn, Jean-Jacques Dozy and Fritz Wissel reached both the glacier-covered East Carstensz and Ngga Pulu summits on December 5, but through bad weather failed in their attempts to climb the bare Carstensz Pyramid. Because of extensive snow melt, Ngga Pulu has become a 4,862 meters subsidiary peak, but it has been estimated that in 1936 Ngga Pulu was indeed the highest summit, reaching over 4,900 meters. The now highest Carstensz Pyramid summit was not climbed until 1962, by an expedition led by the Austrian mountaineer Heinrich Harrer with 3 other expedition members, the New Zealand mountaineer Philip Temple, the Australian rock climber Russell Kippax, and the Dutch patrol officer Albertus Housinger. Temple had previously led an expedition into the area and pioneered the access route to the mountains. When Indonesia took control of the province in 1963, the peak was renamed Puncak Soekarno, or Sukarno Peak, after the first president of Indonesia. Later this was changed to Puncak Jaya. Puncak means peak, mountain, and Jaya means victory, victorious is or glorious is. The name Carstensz Pyramid is still used among mountaineers. Geology. Puncak Jaya is the highest point on the Central Range, which was created in the late Miocene-Melanesian orogeny, caused by a oblique collision between the Australian and Pacific plates, and is made of Middle Miocene limestones. Access to the peak requires a government permit. The mountain was closed to tourists and climbers between 1995 and 2005. As of 2006, access is possible through various adventure tourism agencies. Glaciers. While Puncak Jaya's peak is free of ice, there are several glaciers on its slopes, including the Carstensz Glacier, West North Wall Fern, East North Wall Fern and the recently vanished Meron Glacier in the Meron Valley. Being equatorial, there is little variation in the mean temperature during the year and the glaciers fluctuate on a seasonal basis only slightly. However, analysis of the extent of these rare equatorial glaciers from historical records shows significant retreat since the 1850s, around the time of the Little Ice Age maximum, which primarily affected the northern hemisphere, indicating a regional warming of around 0.6 degrees Celsius per century between 1850 and 1972. The glacier on Puncak Jaya in the Mayoke Mountains disappeared completely sometime between 1939 and 1962. Since the 1970s, evidence from satellite imagery indicates the Puncak Jaya glaciers have been retreating rapidly. The Meron Glacier melted away sometime between 1994 and 2000. An expedition led by paleoclimatologist Lonnie Thompson in 2010 found that the glaciers are disappearing at a rate of 7 meters thickness per year and should be vanished by 2015. Climbing Puncak Jaya is one of the more demanding climbs in one version of the 7 Summits Peak bagging list. It is held to have the highest technical rating, though not the greatest physical demands of that list's ascents. The standard route to climb the peak from its base camp is up the north face and along the summit ridge, which is all hard rock surface. Despite the large mine, the area is highly inaccessible to hikers and the general public. The standard route to access base camp as of 2013 is to fly into the nearest major town with an airport, Timika, and then take a small aircraft over the mountain range and onto an unimproved runway at one of the local villages far down from the peak. It is then typically a 5-day hike to the base camp through very dense jungle and with regular rainfall, making the approach probably the most miserable of the 7 summits. Rain during most days of the hike inbound and out are not uncommon. Also, unlike the other 7 summits, if one sustains an injury at any point on the inbound hike, there is little or no ability to get rescued via helicopter, so anyone injured must evacuate by foot over very difficult and slippery terrain. An additional complication is relatively common strikes by the climbing porters that accompany most expeditions, occasionally halting the work to demand higher pay before agreeing to continue. The one-day summit bid is technically challenging for those with little rock climbing experience, and it can be quite cold with temperatures at below freezing near the summit. Patches of snow sometimes appear on the route up or on the ropes of the Tyrolean traverse just below the summit. The descent from the peak's base camp can take 3 to 4 days. Anecdotally, it appears most injuries occur during the descent due to a combination of exhaustion and difficulty controlling hiking speed on the wet and slippery terrain.